Welcome to the CABAL 2 Character Spotlight, where I will be covering the final two classes, the plate wearers of CABAL 2, the Force Shielder and the Warrior. The Force Shielder is your all-powerful tank, wearing heavy armor and wielding a longsword and a shield to protect his allies and deal some decent damage on his own. As a tank, if you choose a Force Shielder, it is vital that you learn which abilities are which, as well as getting used to rotation that'll maximize your threat in a PvE situation while shutting down your enemies in a PvP situation. The Force Shielder has a lot of abilities in his arsenal, but also greatly depends on situational abilities that will proc depending on what the Force Shielder is doing, whether he successfully blocked an ability or is finishing a consecutive ability chain. His basic consecutive chain, starting with Rend, involves his longsword and will be vital in getting a lot of his defensive moves to begin. His battle mode is Power of Guardianship and will heavily increase his damage and defense, so if you're something squishy, beware. He also has auras that either maximize his defense or allow him to deal some damage at the expense of a little armor. The Force Shielder has to attack and deal some damage to an enemy to get his best defensive abilities going, so make sure that you have his consecutive ability on the ready. You'll notice some previously grayed out abilities become active once he finishes his chain, and, like the Force Blader, you have to choose which ability to use at the given time that best suits the situation. He has a self-heal that will proc, as well as a damage-dealing ability, but using one will cause the other to become grayed out once again, making sure you have to repeat your consecutive ability to keep going. He also has a heavy hitting ability that only goes off after a successful shield block, so make sure to keep an eye on it once it procs, since it'll be a vital component to your damage output. Successfully blocking or parrying an ability will put you in the shield parry state, which slightly increases your defense and allows you to use other previously unusable abilities. Self-heal is best used before another quick aggro pool. His pool will interrupt any abilities being cast, and will probably scare some unaware wizard or force archer, so keeping your distance will be your best chance at not being stunned for days. Make sure to use your proc abilities in a way that best fits the situation. Using your heal will make you have to restart your consecutive chain, and you'll also miss out on using your ability that only becomes active during the shield parry state, which should be kept on cooldown as much as possible. The Force Shielder also has a charge that will daze the opponent briefly and will open up a small consecutive chain that will keep the opponent locked up enough to take some heavy damage. The Force Shielder is incredibly tanky and will survive multiple enemies hitting him, but a lack of strong AoE and having his hardest hitting abilities be one-hit wonders will make him a slow leveler if you just want to pull the entire map. But what good is a tank without some strong defense and amazing crowd control (CC) abilities to make sure his allies don't get murdered on the battlefield? His ability Rage Blade acts like a taunt every time he hits, increasing his aggro against the enemy target. Though this is purely a PvE ability, most players wouldn't even realize it's on. His stun is Judgment, which interrupts any ability being cast and leaves the target stunned for 1.5 seconds, plenty of time to rage about how OP the Force Shielder class is. He also has a slow that is useful for helping out allies, since the Force Shielder doesn't really need to kite. Vanishing Cloak is another great aggro increaser, as well as his pull and charge consecutive abilities, which also stun the target momentarily. His main taunt is Recklessness, which is most likely going to be kept on cooldown in PvE. The Force Shielder has the greatest CC potential in the game, but remember, there are CC cooldowns, so being permanently stunned is not going to be an option. In a PvP situation, no matter how imposing he looks charging towards you, never make a Force Shielder your top priority, especially if there are higher damage dealers in play around you. The Force Shielder battle mode is Power of Guardianship, which heavily increases his survivability, as well as grant him a little more damage output than usual. As with most battle modes, he has a consecutive chain, an AoE chain that is great for taunting multiple enemies as long as you hit the ability, a nuke ability, a CC pool ability, an ability that greatly increases his defense, and a self-heal, much like the one he gets outside of his battle mode. Once his battle mode activates, he should be kited around and generally avoided because he packs a serious punch and will be even harder to kill in this state. It's great for all situations and will no doubt save a life or two. The Warrior is a high damage plate wearing class that attacks slower than the Force Blader, but each hit will bring some serious pain to the enemy. The Warrior is meant to be a hard-hitting class with a little more survivability, at the expense of attack speed and mobility. Looking through their abilities, you'll notice hardly any proc abilities, but rather highly situational attacks that will be useless without getting a good rotation down first. Their buff, Savage Roar, increases attack damage to all members of the party. They can also increase their damage and crit strike even more through some handy self buffs, but with longer cooldowns. Her main consecutive chain, starting with Bash, is incredibly handy for initial burst damage, but it is highly recommended to use her bleed ability, Stab, to keep a constant dot ticking on the enemy. Her battle mode is Power of Destruction, which suits the Warrior better than any other battle mode name. She has a charge ability that will be a huge advantage to the Warrior in any situation, but has a long cooldown and should be used as a starter in PvE and a gap closer in PvP situations. Her one proc ability is Lacerate, which starts a consecutive chain that will be huge in her damage output. Starting with Stab is great for making sure the enemy is always taking damage in between her long animations and cooldowns. If it wears off and the enemy is still up, you'll start noticing her damage output going down, which is never a good thing. She has great CC abilities to keep her enemies in place, which is important because warriors don't have much in the way of catching up to those long-range enemies, especially during her cooldown downtime. Yeah, take that, Spire. However, trying to use her CC abilities consecutively will only be a waste of a cooldown due to the CC immunity players and mobs alike receive after being stunned once. Her AoE abilities are also substantial, coming in second place after the wizard. The warrior should never be underestimated in a battle, despite having low attack speed, because if they catch you, it is incredibly difficult to escape. The warrior also has an ability that has a chance of proccing a buff that will slowly increase her mana, which is good because the warrior is shockingly mana heavy to use, almost like the Force Archer. The warrior also has one long-range pull in case she wants to pull a solitary mob from a distance, without getting the attention of others around it. Using Lacerate, the minute it procs, will always bring enemy mobs down fast, but her AoE abilities are so much fun to use, solitary mob or not. The warrior has some great self buffs, such as Inner Will, which increases her critical accuracy and critical damage for a short time. Her defensive ability is Cunning Defense, that increases her defense by waving her greatsword erratically, if the tooltip is taken literally. It's great for PvP situations if you have an annoying Force Blader that needs to be taken down quickly and without much health point loss. She also has Berserker Rage, that increases all damage for a short time, perfect for taking down enemies quickly, especially if you've taken a lot of damage recently and need to kill things as fast as possible. But it does have a long cooldown. Feel free to yell while activating it for a bonus effect. The Warrior Battle Mode, Power of Destruction, is appropriately named and will make the warrior a terrifying force on the battlefield. Like all damage classes, she has a basic consecutive chain, an AoE chain, a huge nuke ability that annihilates opponents, a self-CC ability, and a CC ability that helps her take down an enemy fast and brutal. Her nuke ability is devastating and will make you almost never want to play another class again. Her AoE attack is one of the most satisfying things to use, and this is one battle mode that makes it feel like 20 seconds has passed rather than a full minute. This has been GMIC, and thank you all for watching. This wraps up the Character Spotlight series, but stay tuned for our last feature spotlight on battlefields, as well as my streams that will be focusing on individual classes. Bye everyone!